Hello and welcome to the programme which looks at the Holy Land. I am Paul Calvert. Psalm 23 verse 4 from the New King James Bible says this, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
I'm with Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis 123 Foundation. It's looking like the war is over and the hostages are coming home. How happy are the people in Israel today, Jonathan?
Wow, that's a very good question. There's a lot of elation. There is, because it seems like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. First and foremost, I would say that the 48 hostages will be released. And we have to remember that they're not all Israelis, and they're not all Jewish. So when we talk about the hostages, we're talking about an international group of people with at least a few, if not several, different nationalities. That's important, and that's something that's on a lot of levels bringing Israelis together. But having said that, there's a lot of cynicism, skepticism, all of which, from my perspective, is very proper, because in 2 years of this war, we know we can't trust Hamas. And in 77 and a half years of existence, we also know that those who are subscribers to radical Islam, is actually before the founding of the state, it goes back 100 and more years, are going to do everything possible at any point possible to try and destroy Israel and the Jewish people here. So there's certainly optimism, and I think that many Israelis need a breath, but I think also a lot of people are realizing that probably, if not inevitably, this may stop combat at the present, but it's just kicking the can down the road again, where we're going to have to confront it in the future.
Will this be a very moving time to see the final hostages come home, and whether they're alive, and obviously there'll be some dead bodies to come through? Will this be very moving for the people of Israel? Will there be a big relief as well?
Yeah, moving, by the way, can go in a number of directions. There is a relief. This morning when I woke up and saw the news and saw people popping champagne corks in celebration, there's good reason for that, specifically among the families of the hostages. And you can't help but want to join that celebration. But emotional also involves families whose loved ones have been killed or maimed by terrorists who are going to be released as part of this deal. And that creates a tremendous amount of additional trauma for them. I'll speak personally for a moment. Maybe it gives a little bit of a reprieve for me and my sons and my son-in-law, who have all been serving a huge amount of time in the last 2 years. My oldest son, who was called up on October 7th 2 years ago as a newlywed, just went back up into reserves for another 3 months as a new father of less than 2 months. So we're hopeful for that. But then I look at my grandchildren and I can't help but think, and I know others share this perspective and legitimate worry, that they're just going to, whether it's 5 years or another 50 years. Remember, the biggest previous trauma here in Israel prior to October 7th of 23 was the Yom Kippur War of 73. And I don't know if it's going to take 5 years or 50 years for our enemies to rise up and inflict another trauma like this. I don't know.
This has really affected Israel over the last 2 years. The focus has really been upon Gaza, but also as well, like you've just said, families have been split because part of their families had to go and fight in the war. And again, some people have came back with dead bodies because so many soldiers have been killed. But there's also a lot of soldiers we maybe don't think about so much have been really injured, and perhaps some of them seriously injured.
Tens of thousands are injured. We're dealing with spouses, and in most cases it's women who have had to hold up the home front and take care, like my daughter, when my son-in-law, every time he was in the army, first there were 3 kids, then there were 4 kids, and she would be home alone with all of the children. And that, it takes an emotional toll on a whole host of levels. We hear anecdotally that there's trauma of couples being able to maintain the marriages because of what they've been through and the separation and the stress, and the combat soldiers specifically who have witnessed and experienced horrible things. So your question is a great question. And yes, we're going to see celebration, but we're also going to see whether it's deliberate in the sense that Hamas in the past would have these obscene ceremonies, releasing bodies or hostages. Even if they don't do that, I feel like I'm already in the midst of the psychological trauma simply because I'm as skeptical as I am. And I'm looking at it realistically and not wanting to celebrate because I don't want to get my hopes dashed and I have to be pragmatic. So it's an amazing question. It just runs the whole wide range of all the emotions possible.
Now we're praying that Israel does get their hostages back, every single one, whether dead or alive. But Israel's paying a very high price, aren't they, to get these hostages back? They're letting Palestinian prisoners go. Who are they releasing?
It's not prisoners; they're terrorists. These are people.
Yep.
These are not people who. It's not breaking and entry. It's not car theft. It's not even sexual assault. We're talking about terrorists who have been arrested because of various terrorist acts that they've supported or in most cases committed. And as I understand it, and again, I'm not yet clear that all the terms are final or that will be upheld, but we're talking about as many as 2,000 terrorists that are going to be released back on the streets. I hope many of them are going to Gaza, where they really have no great way in or out, and that's fine. But many of them are going to come to Judea and Samaria and be on top of Jewish communities and will certainly go back. They're not reformed, they're just being released. And those who are from Jerusalem will be going back to Jerusalem. And as I was explaining to a Christian group that I hosted here just today, that also means that they can hop on a bus or a train and go to any part of Israel and commit terrorist attacks wherever they are. So this is something that in previous hostage releases, where there's also releases of terrorists, there's a great amount of concern that they will be repeat offenders, and there's documentation of the fact that many and perhaps even most of them are or will be.
I've read that 250 have life sentences. They're going to be released. That's going to be quite a worry for Israel. Now, as we get further into this deal that Donald Trump has put together, I've read number 6 on the Trump plan. What are we going to do with Hamas? Do you think Hamas is just going to suddenly change their mind and say, we're not going to be terrorists anymore? Do you think they'll get the weapons? And do you think you can de-radicalize someone like Hamas? And where are they going to go? Are they going to leave Gaza? Are we going to end up having Hamas terrorists in Europe? And maybe they're going to start plotting things in Europe. There's a lot of questions, isn't there?
Well, yes, there are many questions. To answer your first 3 questions, my answer is no, no, and no. We can't trust them. They are not going to suddenly have... Look, God can do anything, but I'm not projecting a radical change of heart. You and I have spoken about my plan, Solution for Peace in Gaza.com, which is involving a radical change of heart, but something that would take place over time. It's not a immediate God-inspired thing that we can see a radical transformation overnight or in a short period of time. That takes time. Having said that, the important piece that you just alluded to is that we're speaking about a deal that relates to Gaza specifically and only. It doesn't mean that Hamas cells in Judea and Samaria or entire cities and villages that are known to be under the domination of Hamas are going to no longer be under that domination. Of course they are, and of course Hamas will continue. And I would argue that while their short-term focus may be less on terror against Israel, if the Palestinian Authority is reformed at all and revised at all, and they are given any more sense of authority in Gaza, and there's a stronger push against Hamas to strengthen the Palestinian Authority, I think that we're going to see the Hamas guns turn against the Palestinian Authority, literally and figuratively, and we can see a revolution in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank the same way we saw that in Gaza in 2007.
Does the Israeli cabinet, I'm not sure where we're at the moment in the time frame of the day, but does the Israeli cabinet have to approve this, or have they approved this?
Apparently, the cabinet and the government have to approve it. And I think that as we're speaking, they're in the midst. I don't know at which level of conversations. I before we started recording this conversation, I quickly updated, refreshed all of the news sources that I look at to see if there was any kind of update. It may very well be that there is one now as we're speaking, or there will be shortly. But yeah, the government has to approve it. It appears logically that at least two of the parties of the government are not going to support the deal. That won't necessarily make the deal not happen. I'm not yet sure how it works, who has to vote, but we've heard that the opposition parties have guaranteed Netanyahu support from outside the coalition government in order to make a deal like this happen. So that may happen short term, but we also have to recognize, Paul, that anyway, in 2026, there were going to be parliamentary elections here. It was scheduled for a year from now. I think intuitively, we were already at the same time as we're seeing this deal being proposed and potentially fulfilled, we're seeing the beginning of the 2026 election campaign, because you will see political parties to the right and to the left, or center, to the extent that there really is not much of a left anymore, that are really going to be stepping up their own constituent appeals by being more hardline for or against such a deal, possibly pulling out of the government, so that when they do run in 2026 for election, that they're distinguished from the main political party at the head of the current coalition, which is Likud under Netanyahu. But I think we're in that pre-election period, and I think we're going to start to see that heat up relatively soon, no matter how this goes.
Now, Trump is going to be coming to Israel and address the Knesset. Do you think he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize?
I think that even if the deal doesn't go well, I do think he does deserve a Nobel Prize. It's astounding that he will have been able to pull this off, even though it won't bring peace. Okay, this is not the end of a conflict. This is the end of a battle. And that's important. You're British and I'm American. I grew up in places where the British and American armies fought each other in what the Americans call the Revolutionary War. There were many battles that a single battle didn't end the war. And I think that that's the situation. I think it would be very fitting for Trump to get a Nobel Peace Prize. We have to see if it really is a deal that goes through and makes any kind of substantial difference. Otherwise, it's simply a negotiation. But yeah, I think that that's a very legitimate direction to go. But what I read earlier today is that wouldn't be before a year from now, because apparently they've already decided on the 2025 recipient.
On this day with cautious optimism, what is your prayer?
You always end it so well, Paul. I'm praying that the good aspects of this deal will come to fruition. I am praying that the hostages will be released. I'm praying that the families will have comfort and everyone will begin to be able to heal, as well as the families of the soldiers, and that we're able to start to see a peaceful outcome. And I'm using the word peaceful and not peace very prudently, but a peaceful outcome that allows husbands and fathers and spouses to no longer have to be focused that when they go into reserves that they're necessarily going into combat. But we need to be strong. I pray that this will be a unifying time and not a divisive time.
You're an Orthodox Jew working with Christians. What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
Thank you. It's Genesis123.co, and I already alluded to the other site for the actual peace program that we've been promoting, which is called solutionforpeaceingaza.com.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for sharing today.
Always a pleasure. I pray for good things.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.